My fiance and I moved into a little neighborhood in eastern Kentucky back in 2019. It was a nice little place for the most part. They liked to have block parties, and just about everyone would participate in one way or another, and the demographics were all over too. There were people close to our age, with and without kids, some older people, and even a guy that seemed a little out there, but otherwise was mostly harmless. Surprisingly, the story isn't even about him. Rather, it was about our direct next-door neighbor, Martha. Martha started as a pretty normal neighbor. As we were moving in, we would catch her watching us from her front window or standing out on her porch, sweeping or dusting off her porch swing. Little things like people do under the guise of being nosy. We were the new people though, so it was no big deal to us. As we continued moving and getting settled in, she would smile and wave at us, but there wasn't much else in ways of contact from her. One day, after reorganizing and some unpacking, we ordered a pizza, and since it felt so nice out, we sat out on the porch with 2 fold-out chairs and just enjoyed the night. And that's when we officially met. She was taking out a bag of trash when she called out to us, so we started talking. She introduced herself, said that she had been divorced for over 20 years and that she got the house. She seemed to brag that she was pretty well made with the alimony and the few lawsuits that she had won. Kind of weird, but it was whatever. We introduced ourselves, and when I mentioned fiancé, she did what most people did and asked when the wedding was. We said that we were just planning on having a small ceremony at the courthouse with a few close people, and then she practically scoffed. She spoke directly to Jackie, my fiancé, telling her that she hoped I was worth it if I wasn't willing to give her the world and have an extravagant wedding, and then told her not to settle. She laughed about it afterwards, but it was still kind of rude at first. Getting married was important to both of us. A large, expensive ceremony was not. I even asked her many times if she was sure this is what she wanted, and she agreed. I had to convince her to at least have a nice dinner party afterwards with just our close friends and family, because all of it really was not a big deal for her. But after that conversation, she just kind of lingered and then said that she would leave us be, and went back inside. We just chalked it up to having one of those neighbors and left it alone. A few months later, we were pretty well settled in, and since it was close to autumn, we wanted to start working on the backyard so it would be ready for us in the spring. There were a lot of dead vines along the privacy fence, weeds all over the raised garden bed in the back, in the area that we wanted to use to start our own produce garden with, as well as some other potentially nice bushes that just needed some extra TLC. After cleaning it up a bit, we had some music playing and just sat out back drinking a beer and enjoying our work. Shortly after, Martha comes out back and again starts talking to us. We mentioned what all we did, and Jackie offered to let her through the back so that she could see, and she agreed. She came over and she seemed impressed with what we had done. When Jackie started mentioning her plans for part of the yard, Martha cut her off. "You need to get rid of those ugly bushes over there. They make it impossible for me to see into your yard with them there. I tried telling the couple that lived here before, but they never listened." Taken aback, I just looked at her, not sure how to respond, when Jackie laughed and said that she had no intentions on removing them. She said that they were pollinator bushes, so they were good to have, but that she would keep them trimmed. They weren't going over the fence to her side, but they were staying otherwise. Martha did not seem happy with this response and told us basically, "Well, it's your yard, I guess," and pretty much left after that. We both agreed that we may just put in more if we had to. From then on, Martha seemed to be against us. or more so against Jackie for the longest time. If we were outside, she would smile and wave at me, but the moment Jackie came around, she would grimace and walk away. She would greet me at the mailbox, but would hurry along or even stand in front of our mailbox while she went through her own, blocking Jackie from being able to get to the mail. One of the worst things she tried was when Jackie was coming home from work, Martha was in our front yard and stopped her. She asked Jackie why there were so many different young girls coming and going from our home. When she questioned this, Martha claimed that she saw 3 or 4 really young and pretty girls visiting when she was gone, and that she thought about calling her but didn't have her number, hinting towards getting it from her. Jackie told her that she would handle it and walked away, only angering her more that she was denied her phone number. And I really don't understand her reasoning for even wanting the number. Jackie, of course, told me what she said, which is how I know, and thankfully neither of us are the jealous type. She knew it wasn't true. The only other women that ever came over to our house were our moms, my sister, or sometimes Jackie would come home with a friend, but that was it. It seemed to anger Martha more knowing that whatever she was scheming was not causing a rift between us. But it didn't seem to stop her. She tried to do all these little things to get under Jackie's skin at first. Jackie had a few yard ornaments out front. The front yard did not have a fence, and they would be slightly moved. She had a ceramic flamingo wearing a Hawaiian shirt sitting by the steps up to our door. Martha had moved it to the edge of our yard. I work from home and have always been a pretty big tech guy, so we've had security cameras since day one. We reviewed the cameras and we watched her pick it up and move it. Why though? We thought we would ignore it for a while, but after she did the same thing twice more, I finally confronted her. She always did it early in the morning, before we were even awake, but I set my alarm and was up and ready. When I got the notification on my phone, I immediately went outside to see her in a robe and carrying our flamingo. I startled her when I loudly said, "Hey, what are you doing?" She dropped him, thankfully it didn't break somehow, and smiled at me saying that she thought someone was moving it, so that she was moving it back. I told her that it was always at the front and that my camera shows her moving it. She then tried to go through the list of excuses. It looks better over here. It looks creepy and she can see it from her window, and she doesn't like it. And as she did this, she was opening her robe ever so slightly to expose her thighs or the top of her bra. This woman was old enough to be my mother, so I really don't like to think that's what she was going for. I told her that regardless of what she thought, she had no right messing with our stuff, and that if it continued, I would be calling the cops to get her trespassed. She seemed to take the not-so-subtle hint and quickly walked away. I really thought that that was going to be the end of it, and that we were just going to have a cranky old neighbor, but I was so wrong. We didn't have many interactions with her, besides her now being hostile towards the both of us, until people started mentioning break-ins in the neighborhood. However, the only one reporting them was Martha, and she never told anyone who the victims were. And then, one day as we were making dinner, someone knocked on our door. I went to answer it, and I was surprised to see 2 cops standing there. They asked to come in, and I of course let them in. I sat on the couch as they explained the recent break-ins in the area. Then he mentioned that Martha was a recent victim. I was surprised. We heard and saw nothing, so I asked if she was okay. Sure, she was a pain, but I didn't wish any harm on her. One of the cops didn't have a very good poker face, and looked at me suspiciously while the other one kept the same demeanor and asked me more about it, until the questions started becoming more accusatory. He then broke it to me that Martha claimed that she saw me throw the rock in her window, which is why they were over here talking to me. I told them neither of us had anything to do with it, and that we had been home the whole time. I even told them about my cameras and showed them the footage. They looked over it, scrolled through the entire day, and they didn't see us leave the house once, or go over towards her place at all. I work from home and Jackie had the day off, so we had both been inside all day. Satisfied with what they saw, they said that they had no proof and only hearsay anyways, so they just wanted to ask questions. They apologized for the intrusion and left. I was beyond furious. She was now trying to, frame us? I was even starting to doubt all of the break-ins. Did she break her own window just to set this all up? Who would even do that? But just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, a few nights after that incident, Jackie and I were in the living room watching TV when there was a loud crashing sound, and our front bay window was smashed in, with a rock that was now sitting on our living room floor. Jackie ran to the kitchen and called the cops, while I approached the front door, now holding the only thing close to a weapon that I had, an umbrella. I walked outside and saw nothing. Maybe they didn't realize we were home and fled when they heard us scream. But with everything else that had occurred that week, I went back to check the window, and my worry quickly turned into anger. There, on my living room floor, was the small decorative rock that Martha had along the side of her house. I knew that it had to be from hers, because they were all painted. I immediately checked my camera, and wouldn't you know it, she walked into our yard carrying this rock, lowered her head, I guess to try and hide her face, and threw the rock through the window. I showed the police the footage when they arrived, and they pretty quickly went over and she was walked out in cuffs. After I calmed down that night, Jackie convinced me that the whole ordeal probably scared her enough, and that we probably shouldn't press charges. Instead, she had to pay to replace the window and apologize to us, and to be honest, that was pretty satisfying. We got the window replaced pretty quick, and to our surprise, we rarely saw Martha after that. If she was outside and we went out, even if it was just to get the mail or take out the trash, she quickly went back inside. She attended one of the block parties since then, but she steered clear from us. We became pretty good friends with a couple across the street, and they said they were surprised because she used to complain about them a lot, but seemed to stop out of nowhere. So it appeared that we were not the only ones that she targeted. I still have no idea why though. We actually lived there for a few more years until we finally moved, but Martha was still there. I just hope the new owners either get along with her, or, on the other end of that, are willing to stand up to her bullying. Hello, Raven. It's Amy again. I have a friend who lives in Colorado, and just recently, she had a very scary experience involving one of her neighbors. She gave me full permission to share this story to your channel, and just asked that I gave her a fake name and different location for the story. I hope that you enjoy this one. It was a very scary experience for her, but in the end, she is okay, safe, and the issue was resolved. Back in spring of 2022, I, a 39-year-old female, had just purchased my first home in a small town in Michigan, to be closer to my family. Growing up in a somewhat low-income family, I was more than excited and proud to have finally purchased my own house. I was single, no kids, no pets, and this was a big milestone for me. The house was a bit smaller, definitely single-family sized, with just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and 1 level. But it was more than enough for me. My backyard had no fence, and it also led to the neighbor's backyard, who also didn't have a fence. The neighbor, who I didn't formally get to meet, appeared to be in his mid-50s, average height, and had a few tattoos on his arm. Now, I'm a pretty private sort of person, so I didn't make note to go over and introduce myself to him, and vice versa. We both kept to ourselves. But that soon changed. About maybe a month into moving in, I woke up one morning, a cup of coffee in my hand, and was about to sit on my porch that overlooked my backyard. I remember it was on a Saturday because I didn't have to go into work that day, and was planning on enjoying a quiet morning peacefully, just enjoying my coffee and reading on my porch. However, when I stepped out, I noticed something that I was not expecting to find in my yard. My neighbor, who I'll just refer to in this story as AJ, had installed a small chain link fence. Now, most of you, including myself, would at first think there's no problem with that, as long as it's on the neighbor's property line, but when I took a better look, I noticed there was a door on the fence. Basically, the gate was right in the middle of the fence that would open right up into my backyard. Curious, I walked over to closer inspect the fence, and did see that the gate door was in fact installed to go between my yard and the neighbor's yard. Most fences, when installed in a backyard, are intended to run along the perimeter of the side between each property, so having an open gate door seemed odd. I decided not to say anything to the neighbor about this, just noting that it was weird and put the issue in the back of my mind. However, about a week later, as I was once again coming out onto my porch, I noticed something lying in the middle of my backyard. I walked over and saw that it was an empty beer bottle. I bent down and picked it up, and I noticed the gate between my yard and AJ's yard was left wide open. I looked around and didn't see AJ was anywhere in sight, but I could only assume that the empty beer bottle and open fence door were his doing. This definitely became a red flag for me, and I started to make more notes of being wary of him. Things quickly escalated, and the next morning when I woke up, I was making my morning coffee and had heard a thud on my porch. I quickly opened my back door and stepped onto my porch to see my neighbor sitting on one of my chairs, smoking a cigarette. He didn't even look surprised when I saw him. Appalled and even a little scared, I asked him what he was doing on my property. He just smiled at me and shrugged his shoulders. I again demanded to know why he was on my property, and I asked him to leave immediately. Again, he sort of just shrugged his shoulders, stood up, and walked off the porch. He left through the open fence door, while I angrily shouted at him to not come back onto my property again. At first, finding the empty beer bottle and open gate had me aware, but now I was on high alert and scared about this. I talked to a few friends and family members about it, and they suggested that I start installing a security camera on my back porch so I can have physical evidence if AJ should ever return onto my property. So I did just that, and with the help of my brother-in-law, the camera was installed. My sister also argued that if the door on his fence was opening into my yard, I should go as far as putting a padlock on the door to prevent AJ from being able to come onto my yard. I didn't think that was necessary. Now that I had the camera installed, I felt a little more at peace about the situation. A few weeks later, it's around 9 or 10 at night, I'm in my bedroom, curled up in bed with my book, when my phone notifies me of movement spotted on the security camera. I pull up the camera footage, and to my horror, I see my neighbor standing on my porch and seemingly checking out the door. Fortunately, it was locked, but the camera live feed showed him actually trying the doorknob. Horrified, I press on the microphone button for my camera and tell him that I can see him, and tell him that he needs to get off my property right now. AJ looks up at the camera and gives that same non-caring smile and shouts that he just wants to talk to me. I repeat to him to leave and that I would be calling the police. I jump out of my bed and phone the police, all while watching AJ just standing on my porch. To sum it up, he eventually left before the police arrived, but they did issue him a trespass warning. And no, this still wasn't the end of it. From then on, I did not feel comfortable even stepping onto my own backyard. Any yard work I did, I dreaded doing in worry that AJ would be outside and that he would try to approach me. I did start the process of getting a privacy fence installed in my yard, just for extra security measures. I also would still find an empty beer bottle or two lying in my yard, to which I finally took the advice of my sister and put a padlock onto the fence door, in hopes of preventing him from being able to enter my yard. Still, this did not deter him. My security camera showed him break the padlock and open the door. When this happened, I had rushed out, phone in hand, and recording him on my phone as another form of evidence of him trespassing onto my property again. He actually had the audacity to yell at me for placing a padlock on his fence, while I argued back that he was now trespassing on my property, even after being given trespass warnings by the police. Eventually, I got my privacy fence installed. I had hoped that this would finally put a stop to AJ, and yet, this only showed how much further he was willing to go to trespass and enter my property. I had actually recorded him climbing over my privacy fence and jumping into my yard. As usual, I had to demand that he leave and that he was being recorded. Then, the worst had yet to happen. It had been around a few months of this constant war with AJ when I was awoken one night, around 2:30 in the morning, to a loud crashing sound at my front door. Startled, confused, and terrified, I snatched the golf club that I had been keeping underneath my bed and went out into the hallway to investigate. To my absolute shock, my front door had been kicked in. It was still on its hinges, but the door was kicked in so hard that when I went to check the damage, I realized I wouldn't be able to close or lock it. I quickly dialed the police and my parents to tell them what had happened. By the time both the police and my parents had gotten to my house, I was a mess. The emotional trauma and terror over the last 2 months had finally taken its toll on me, and now I was outright terrified for my life. The police went next door and questioned AJ, and thanks to my recordings and previous history of AJ being served with the trespassing warnings and complaints, he was served a restraining order. And after that, he had finally stopped harassing me. Within that same year, he ended up moving away for good. I know this story isn't as scary as a lot of the others that you hear or have probably read, but this experience still terrified me. I had a neighbor who completely disrespected my privacy and my personal property. I still have no clue what his motives were each time I'd catch him on my property, or how much worse it could have gotten. I'm just beyond thankful that I never have to deal with him again and can finally put it behind me. When I was 28, I was looking for a new place to live. I wasn't too happy with the apartment I was in anymore, and I wanted to find something with a bit more room, but still a reasonable price. I was paying too much for a 1-bedroom apartment, so when I found a duplex with 2 bedrooms and a full basement for nearly the same price, I was pretty thrilled. It was in a nicer neighborhood, and was pretty close to my work, which was a real winner for me. I moved in quickly and settled in even faster. I'd like to think that I'm a pretty outgoing person, so I became curious when I hadn't seen my neighbor once while I was moving in. Until one day I saw a middle-aged woman leaving the other duplex. She was in a suit skirt with a jacket, obviously dressed for a nice office job, so I assumed she was probably just really busy and kept to herself. But the times that I started noticing her were pretty sporadic. It was only maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and sometimes I would see her arriving and other times leaving. One of those times, I was just coming home myself as she was leaving. We made eye contact, so I stopped to say hi and to introduce myself. She was very nice, and she told me her name was Teresa, but she actually didn't live there. Her 80-year-old dad, Carol, did. She said she came to visit him a few times a week. She would get his groceries, take him to doctor's appointments, things like that. She also mentioned that he didn't get out much, so I probably wouldn't see him much, but that he would probably talk my ear off if I did see him. After talking for a little bit, she left and I went about my business. From then, I would occasionally see him when he got his mail or left with Teresa to go wherever. When we were outside at the same time, he would talk to me about pretty much anything on his mind. He was definitely a kind old man, and the fact that he pretty much kept to himself made me think he was going to continue to be a pretty great neighbor. This was a few months into me living there at this point. I came home from work and saw Carol sitting out in the chair on his side of the patio in just his cargo shorts. He had a magazine that was rolled up, and he appeared to be swatting the air in an annoying manner. I approached him, and his face softened, and he jokingly said, "Oh, how was work, dear?" That was just who he was, and I didn't mind. We talked for a moment when he brought up how much he hated mosquitoes. I suggested bug spray and the little citronella candles. As we talked, I mentioned how I used to have the tiki torches on my apartment balcony, so I could sit out there and not be bothered. He thanked me, and said that he would remind Teresa to pick some up when she went shopping for him next, and then we said goodbye. A few days later, I saw him outside again and watched from my window as this man sprayed himself all over with the bug spray. He sprayed his legs, his arms, his torso, and even above him like he was misting himself. It definitely looked strange to me, but then I thought maybe there was something about the bugs, like a phobia, or maybe he had a fear of being bitten, or maybe they were just really that much of an annoyance to him. It really wasn't my place to judge, so I left it alone as life continued on as normal. But it was the following night that I sat in my living room, eating my dinner, when I started smelling something funny. It was a strong chemical smell, but I couldn't quite tell what it was. I was worried that something may have caught on fire and started walking around my unit. My cat had been sitting next to me, so I knew that she didn't get into anything. I checked all the sockets, anything electrical that I could think of, including the heat lamp on my iguana's cage, but everything seemed fine. But the smell still worried me. Was it in my head? Was there something wrong with me by chance? I decided to walk out front to get some fresh air and see if maybe I could still smell it out there. The answer was yes, I could definitely smell it, but I had also figured out what the source of the smell was. It was Carol, once again spraying himself with the same bug spray, and I could now place that scent. We immediately started talking because he heard me open my door, of course. He claimed the bugs were getting worse, and were now getting inside his home. He talked about how he couldn't stand it, so he sprayed all the vents, the doorways, even his air filter. He doused it with the stuff. I tried to get a better explanation at that point, wondering if he was still talking about mosquitoes, or something else. All he could tell me was that they were bugs, and that they were everywhere, I told him to be careful with the spray, trying not to sound mean, and said that it could be harmful to ingest, and that maybe we should contact the rental office so that they can treat for them instead. He said that was probably a good idea, and I went back inside, opening some windows to air out my side of the place. I made a mental note to myself to let Teresa know the next time I saw her to do the same, and to not buy him more bug spray. I was able to let her know, but she said that she had only bought him the one can, and assumed that he probably ordered more online, as he did do that sometimes. Again, it wasn't my place to tell her what to do, but the amount that he was using was almost disturbing, and to practically drench yourself in it was not good either. I saw my share of mosquitoes out there, but he made it seem like there was a swarm of them all over him at all times, and I can assure you that that was not happening. I just told her what I saw and that I was concerned with him spraying it so much, and she said that she would talk to him about it, and that was that. Unfortunately, the bug spray wasn't even the worst of it. While I was in bed, going in and out of sleep, I had become pretty hot, and was almost irritable with how hot it was. I sat up in bed wondering if there was something wrong with the AC, and no sooner than when I got out of bed, the smoke alarm started going off. I panicked and ran out of my room to see flames from the living room window and tons of dark smoke coming in from the vents. I grabbed my cat and my iguana, scaring them both, I'm sure, and ran through the back door, running to the front yard. I had a button latch on my hatchback, so I was able to open it and put them both in there. Thankfully, they both get along too. I had to put them up before I actually approached the cause of the flames, because it was coming from Carol. He was holding one of those tiki torches against the wall, and was watching it as it slowly caught fire. I screamed at him, "What the hell are you doing?" But when he turned around, that was a face I had never seen before. He looked so angry and his eyes were so wide. They looked like they were going to pop out. He said that he finally figured out a way to get rid of the damn bugs. He said that he made a fire on all of his vents, which also meant that our shared wall was on fire, and was now torching the outside. I was so afraid to approach him, being a small woman, but I did, and he surprisingly handed the torch over to me. But he continued to talk about what he had done, like it was some hobby or other harmless project that he was working on. I had my phone on me, and I had grabbed it as I was rounding up the pets, so I finally called 911 once I had my bearings. And the whole time, Carol was just continuing to talk in the background. The firemen arrived quickly and put out the fire, and we both talked to the police about what had happened. Thankfully, Carol did have Teresa's number memorized, so we called her and she was there pretty fast too. It was the only time that I ever saw her not dressed up. That was an awful moment right there, and I think it really opened Teresa's eyes about what was happening. "What did you do, Dad?" She was pleading with him as he continued to talk about the bugs. It was terrifying, but I also felt so bad about the whole thing. I felt like it was my fault. I shouldn't have brought up the spray or the torches or any of it. Once the smoke cleared, literally, they were able to go inside to assess the damage. Most of it was on our shared wall, and the outside wall, of course, and there were some burn spots on the carpet on Carol's side. I had to move a lot of stuff out of my living room so that they could come in and repair it, but otherwise, it was still a good, sturdy building. I didn't see Carol much after that. Teresa had come by and got some of his stuff, but she told me that he was going to be living with her for the time being, and said that she should have done that a lot sooner, joking that she would have saved gas anyways. I wished her well, and once all of his stuff was out, that was the last that I saw of them. After some repairs on the other side, I finally got some new neighbors. It was a younger lady with a baby, and so far they haven't been too bad. I still live there, so Carol lives rent-free in my mind. Sometimes I will randomly smell something funny, or I'll hear the neighbor's smoke alarm go off, and it sets me into a panic. We've talked plenty of times, and she's mentioned how it goes off when she's cooking, so I know everything is okay. But my heart rate still jumps a bit when it happens. I do hope that Carol is doing better now, but since the fire was so close to home, it has kind of become a pretty big fear of mine. I need to tell you some of my background to understand who some of these people are. I, 28, female, moved into my partner, 29, male's, house when we got engaged. We'd been together for 2 years and we wanted to progress with our relationship further. We're happy, good communication, and mutually shared goals. The only person I have friction with in this scenario is his young sister, 21 female, who I guess doesn't like me. She doesn't like how I come from a working class background and thinks that I'm a gold digger who married up. No matter what I've done, it's never enough for her, and she has tried to sabotage our relationship before, even going as far as to make fake screenshots to lie that I was cheating with my partner. We had a small celebration at the new house together and invited some close family and friends. It was a lovely night. The next day we met the neighbors, and they seemed nice enough. I came back home from work and saw his sister was there, the last person I wanted to see, but I was friendly. She had this smug smile that made me suspicious. She left and my partner and I were pleased. He's always been good at sticking up for me, but they are close and she is his baby sister, so he wants me to at least try to make an effort. Now, I know all that was long, but I needed to explain it. I had a neighbor, male, 52, start knocking on the door and come over to chat with us frequently. He was friendly, retired, and I thought that he just wanted to get to know us. My partner and he developed a friendship. However, the neighbor would come over frequently and start speaking to me too. I'd humor him and then politely tell him that I was going to call my family or some other excuse. He then started dropping some more sexualized compliments, that my pants showed off my figure, that he would love to quote-unquote join us sometime. I told him that we just weren't into that, and he told me that I didn't need to be shy, and that he knew that we were swingers. Now, I don't care what someone does with other consenting adults. However, that really just is not my thing. I then asked him to leave. Now. He waited a moment, but then did finally leave. I wish I had asked him at this point where he got this idea. Instantly, I picked up my phone and called my partner to tell him what happened. He told me that he hadn't said anything to give him that impression either. Either way, he was supportive. The next part is when my partner and I were having an intimate moment together. I won't go into details, but basically I don't know when it started. We were having a break when I noticed a figure in the window. I screamed and my partner came out of the bathroom to ask what was wrong. I told him that I thought I saw someone outside the window. By the time he went outside to investigate, all he found were the plants were crushed. The person had left, and fortunately, we did have security cameras around the property. We looked to see the neighbor sneak through the garden, sit in the garden bed, and look through all while, well, how do I put this politely? Fondling himself, jerking the gherkin, wrestling the one-eyed trouser snake. I think you get the picture. I instantly felt sick. We didn't see him for a week or two. My partner's sister then came over again and I had to smile through it. She seemed shocked when she found out what had happened, and laughed about how weird it was. I still didn't put my finger on it at that time. From then on, we made sure the blinds were closed. The next time we saw him, my partner told him that we had him on camera watching us. The neighbor then told us that he thought we were into this, and we both shouted no at the same time. He told us that we enjoyed being watched during the act. My partner demanded to know where the hell he came up with this idea. He then said that my partner's sister had told him that we were swingers, and always on the look for more playmates. Me especially, and that it wouldn't be the first time that I cheated on my fiancée. My partner told him that we were not like that. The neighbor did accept this. He would still look when we walked by, but he kept his distance after that. We then invited his sister over to speak to her to see if it was true. I was furious, and I believed it even without speaking to her. My partner asked if she knew anything about it, and kept insisting. After an hour of conversation, she finally cracked and admitted that she did it. And then she laughed, and wouldn't apologize. When he asked her why, she told him that it was for him to break up with me so that he wouldn't have to deal with me anymore. This all happened 4 years ago, and we still haven't spoken to his sister since then. So that, my friends, was a collection of some creepy neighbor stories. Stories where the person next door is the problem. Thankfully, I've never really had a bad neighbor. Most of my neighbors have actually been pretty fantastic. I guess the neighbor prior to living here was running an unlicensed daycare, kind of, in that they were babysitting a ton of kids. Like 6 or 7 kids all at once. I don't know if that legally qualifies as an unlicensed daycare, but they definitely were not licensed, but they were watching a ton of kids. So, I don't know. That got kind of loud sometimes. Well, there was the one neighbor that got arrested, which is who gave us Tyler. That guy he was kind of weird. Maybe someday I'll write up a story about him. I won't say it's by me. I'll let you guys just hear it. And some of you will know. If you ever hear a story about a weird guy that gives somebody a cat, it's about him. I don't know. Most of my neighbors have been fine. Current connected neighbors, Joanne, she's great. She's deaf. She's a fantastic lady, though. She's very nice. We talk to her. We help her with stuff. She keeps to herself, really. We keep to ourselves. I think that's the best way to do things with neighbors, right? Be friendly when you see each other. Otherwise, leave each other alone. I think it's a good idea. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing, as that would help the channel tremendously. If you would feel ever so bold to do so, go down below the video and hit that comment. Hit the comment box. Click, select, type a comment. Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts, how you're doing, what you thought on the videos, how your week's going, so forth and so on. You can also join Patreon and memberships for get early access to content like this, as that would help support the channel further and get you some fancy stuff. There's also the super thanks, which is just a tip to the channel. Never expected, always appreciated. All that said, friends, hope you're having a beautiful day so far. Hope I to see you again here very soon. But until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And, till next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.